Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I know, I too wonder when I'm going to review another 50mm lens. I don't know, one day. What I do know is that for today we are looking at this lens here, the 6mm f2 fisheye from 7Artisans. Disclaimer time, I reached out and applied for their review program. I was clearly selected. Thus, I've been sent this lens, the 6mm f2 fisheye, to review. What does this mean? I get to receive, or I receive this lens. I did not pay for it, and they asked for a video about the lens. And at the end of the process, I do get to keep it. And for this video, we'll be having a look at the 6mm fisheye via my Fujifilm X-T3. So what is this lens? Well, this lens is produced by 7Artisans, and it's a manual focus APS-C format lens. It's a 6mm f2 fisheye, and that means the field of view offered up here is around 220 degrees. That's a lot of degrees. And it is a lens comprised up of 10 elements in 8 groups, and it features a 9-bladed aperture. I don't know if you can see that, it's deep in there. But speaking about aperture, the aperture ring on this lens is clicked. Ooh. And the minimum focus distance for this lens is 10 centimeters. That's very close. The build of the lens is also quite nice. It is an entirely all-metal build, but that does mean that it comes in at 418 grams, just about. The lens comes in a variety of mounts: E mount, X mount, M43, Z, RF. I have it in the Fuji-X mount, obviously, and lastly, this lens comes in at $199 US dues. Operation and feel. The lens is quite interesting. The build is really good. It is a substantial feeling lens, again, all metal construction, and the elements, as you can see, are huge and bulbousy. The front ring, or the focus ring, is nice and well dampened and very smooth. The focus throw itself is only about 90 degrees of rotation, so let's see if I can demonstrate that. Whoop. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Whoop. That's it, 90 degrees. And one thing to note here, though, is that this lens does not feature a hard stop at infinity, so you can easily slide past it given the small focus throw. And even though the depth of field is excessive, it is not enough to compensate if you toss it over too far past your actual infinity position, which is a bit annoying. The clicked aperture is also quite nice. It has nice clicky, it has a nice clicky feel. It doesn't actually sound very clicky, but the detents are there. And for me, being a dirty photographer, the click itself is well appreciated. But again, it doesn't really make too much noise, so it probably is okay for video. It's just gonna snap over on the aperture stops, which might be a bit odd. I don't know, not a video person, aside from this stuff. At any rate, one thing is that I do wish that the aperture ring did have half stop clicks. This is only full stops. And you might have noticed, but the distance between the full stops is a bit weird and a bit inconsistent. For example, going from f2 to 2.8, it's a pretty short distance. And then all of a sudden, 2.8 to 4 is a bit long. It starts to shrink again, and then it starts to get small. Kind of weird, but whatever. Not a huge thing, just something I noticed. Another thing that is just maybe a personal thing for me is the positioning of the aperture ring and focus ring. Given the lens shape and the way that it tapers, like this, I would have preferred if the rings were reversed, in that I would have preferred if this were focus and this were aperture, since a lot of the times I'm focusing more than changing aperture, and it just feels a little bit cramped with the aperture, with the focus ring in the back. But more, that's maybe just a me thing. I don't know. Being a fisheye lens, you expect the front is very bulbous, and it is no exception on this lens. It does stick out quite a bit, although there is a built-in non-removable lens hood, which helps the lens, or helps me feel like the lens is less vulnerable. But this does also mean that if you have a look at the way this is done, there are no filters that are going on in front of there, at least not easily. There's also not a spot to slot one in the back or whatever. It's just the way it is. Now, if you're going out with this lens, you'll definitely want to pack it with its lens cap. Again, no filters to protect the lens, and very, very bulbousy. And it's nice that they include one, and it's quite nice as well. This is a metal cap, and it's lined just with felt, and it's a friction fit over top the lens. It feels overall pretty well done, but honestly, I would have appreciated if they could have done one of those pinch caps. I'm not a massive fan of these kind of felt caps, but again, maybe just a me thing. Now, there's something I do want to discuss about the lens, and it is the coating that you see here on top of the metal. It is a rubberized kind of coating, and it does provide a good tactile experience on the focus ring and aperture ring. They're, again, just coated metal bits. And oddly enough, this kind of gives it a bit of a vintage feel. The metal rings and the overall dampening of the actual focus ring feels 60s, 70s vintage. That is to say, awesome. But the coating on it, this stuff, feels more late 80s, 90s vintage. Still vintage, but kind of meh vintage. Honestly, it reminds me of Sigma's old lenses, like real old. Like the Sigma Zen series old. And it also gives me a bit of a similar worry in that if I have this in 20 years, it's probably gonna go sticky and peel off. But I'm actually not sure, because 20 years is a long time. But for now, it is a reasonable feeling lens with a coating that is kind of all right. But yeah, it does help with the gripping. It just feels interesting. Like sticky, but not sticky. Again, if you've used older Sigma Zen series lenses when they were not old, it feels kind of like that. Kind of weird. So that's what it's like to touch and turn. What about actually peering through and doing the shooting thing? This lens takes getting used to. Like, at least for me, it took me a while to get used to this. I think even if you're used to ultra wide angle lenses, this lens is still quite a bit jarring. 6mm, or with the field of view equivalent of 9mm, is really wide. It is really insane how much of the world fills the frame. When I'm shooting, I always kind of have to think, I gotta get closer, being how wide this lens is. My subject, in my mind, always appears to be bigger in my mind than it is when I'm looking through the finder. So when I finally look through, I realize I need to take like 10 steps closer. Otherwise, my subject is like this in a frame that is very large. The lens, in general, because of this, made me rethink how I use the lens. It's not a bad thing, especially for someone like me who's used to focal lengths in the 28 to 105-ish kind of region. So getting to try a new perspective is, to be honest, pretty fun. Took me out of my comfort zone, and it also got me to shoot my X-T3, which I gotta do more. So yes, thank you 6mm 7Artisans lens for getting me to actually pick this up. It's a good camera after all. I don't know why. I don't use this as much as I should. But one thing I did struggle with when I was using this was stray things entering the frame. And yeah, 6mm, you get everything. Everything and more. Sometimes you get everything that you want and one extra thing that you didn't. Something just sneaks in the corner, and it, to me, at least for me, it happens more often than I'd like to admit. I would get it all set up, I would get as close as I need to get, I would take the shot, and then I'd get the shot home, review it on a computer, and go, huh, I didn't notice that thing in the corner. And I need to just like bring it in a bit, which is fine, but it just means that you got to be more aware when you're shooting with this. Image quality. This is where I think this lens is actually really quite a treat. The lens is generally really nice. Sharpness overall is good, and the center is especially like great, even wide open, which makes sense to me. With a lens like this, you probably want the center to be quite sharp, since everything around there is going to be all warpy. And again, keep in mind I'm shooting on my X-T3, which features a 26 megapixel sensor. If you have one of the newer 40 megapixel Fujis, I feel like the lens will resolve just fine, but I personally do not have one of those cameras to demonstrate that. But if I ever get one, maybe we'll follow up. But again, back to the lens optical qualityness. Since the center is quite good, you would expect that maybe the mid or edges aren't the goodest. But you'd actually be wrong. Even the mid frame and a lot of the outer edges are a pretty good amount of sharp. The only thing that gets really dicey is extreme corners. But at the same time, when you're looking at the extreme corners, you're getting maximum warpage anyways, and the lens also does vignette. So if you lean into that, that kind of gets hidden. But if you don't want to, stopping down will help. Around f5.6, things look pretty good. One thing I did notice about the lens though was that there were a considerable amount of aberrations. The center is pretty well controlled, but by the time you get mid-frame and outwards, it is pretty noticeable. You'll see fringing around, and it is notable wide open. One thing to remember though is that despite all these fairly reasonable-ish niggles, I think, this lens is pretty quick. It is f2 after all. Most of the times when you see these fisheye lenses, you're looking more 2.8. And if you keep in mind that this is f2 and the fact that the minimum focusing distance is really short at 10 centimeters, you can get some really unique looking images. With the combination of such close focus and the reasonably wide aperture, you get background separation. Is it turbo creamy? No, of course not. It's 6mm. But it does let you pull your subject out a little bit. And I do like it. I tended to try to get as close as I could to my subject to exploit this. And I did really like the way that, given how much depth there is on the lens, you get a lot of your subject in pretty sharp focus, and then you get a reasonable amount of separation, which with the fishiness helps to exaggerate the separation. So I think that the fishiness helps make the separation appear even more, if that makes any sense. Additionally, I found that the lens overall renders a nice, contrasty, punchy image right from the get-go at f2. So overall, I like the IQ that this lens provides. And with that, let's have a look at the sample gallery. Recommendation and conclusion. Overall, this has been a pretty fun experience. If you do have any interest in this type of glass, the ultra-wide, bendy, distorty fishiness, I would place this pretty high up on your priorities list. The fishiness of the lens is very pronounced, and it's not at the expense of image quality, which is pretty awesome. It is a solidly fast lens, it's really well built, if not for that weird coating, and it is a little heavy, but it's not too heavy. Given how stubby it is, it actually bounces pretty well on, I think, most cameras. Maybe not the smallest cameras like the XT 10, 20, or 30 series, but otherwise it would be fine. And given its retail price of $199 US dues, it also won't break the bank, especially if you are comparing it to things like first-party fisheye lenses, which tends to be quite a bit more. Sure, this is a manual focus lens, but given the expansiveness of the depth of your fields, manual focusing on this is pretty easy. That said, this is a niche lens. It is not something that I would pick up and walk around with normally unless I had a very specific shot in mind, as yeah, it's really at least too wide for me to consider a general purpose walk around. But in the case where you do want the fishy bendiness, this delivers in spades. And with that, thanks again to 7Artisans for sending me this to have a look at. With that, I think that's it. If you have any questions about this lens, feel free to leave me a question in the comments below. Otherwise, let me know. Do you normally have a fisheye as part of your kit? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe a super thanks if you're into that. Till next time, bye.